Some people spend their whole lives being the loudest voice in every room. They mistake volume for power. They never stop to consider that the person sitting quietly in the corner, the one who smiles and says nothing, might have already moved every piece on the board long before anyone else knew the game had started. I found out my savings account had been drained on a Tuesday morning in March. Not a gradual drain. Not a few suspicious charges I might have missed while scrolling through my phone over coffee. $31,400. Gone. 3 transfers over 9 days. Each one just small enough to avoid the automatic fraud flag my bank had set at $12,000. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after I saw those numbers. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. Long enough for the initial wave of panic to settle into something quieter and much more dangerous. Then I picked up my phone and called the bank. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the context that took me 29 years to fully understand. My grandmother raised me. That is the simplest way to say it. My parents divorced when I was 4, and what followed was the kind of custody arrangement that existed mostly on paper and not at all in practice. My mother moved to Portland for a man she had met at a conference. My father moved through a series of apartments and a series of problems that I was too young to name, but old enough to feel. My grandmother, my father's mother, was the one who showed up. She drove 40 minutes each way to pick me up from school. She sat with me through fevers. She helped me with college applications at her kitchen table, while the evening news played in the background, and she pretended not to cry when I got my first acceptance letter. My brother is 10 years older than me. He has a different relationship with our grandmother, which is a careful way of saying he has almost no relationship with her at all. He called on holidays. He came to Christmas maybe 3 years out of 5. He was busy, he always said. He had his own life. His wife, a woman he married 6 years ago, made it clear from the beginning that my grandmother's house smelled like old people and that the drive was inconvenient. I am a bookkeeper. I work for a small architecture firm downtown, and I am good at my job because I have always been good with numbers and because I pay attention to details that other people find boring. I notice when things don't add up. I notice when accounts shift in ways that don't have clean explanations. It is not a glamorous skill, but it has served me well. About 2 years ago, my grandmother asked me to help her organize her finances. She was 80 years old in the spring, sharp as anyone I had ever met. But she had developed some arthritis in her hands that made it difficult to manage paperwork, and her eyesight had changed enough that reading small print had become exhausting. I started coming over every other Saturday. We would sit at her kitchen table, the same table where she had helped me with those college applications, and I would go through her accounts, her insurance paperwork, her investment statements. She would drink her tea and ask questions and understand every single answer I gave her. My brother knew I was helping her. He called once to ask if she had changed her will. I told him I had no idea, because that was true, and because it was none of my business. He made a sound on the phone that I still think about sometimes. Not angry exactly, more like a man filing something away. His wife called 2 weeks after that. She asked, very sweetly, whether my grandmother had mentioned anything about the house. I said I didn't know what she meant. She said she was just asking because if my grandmother ever needed help, they would be happy to move in and take care of her. I said that was very kind. I got off the phone, and I sat with that conversation for a long time. The thing about being a bookkeeper is that you learn to trust patterns. And the pattern I was seeing didn't feel like generosity. 8 months ago, I had a minor surgical procedure. Nothing serious. An ovarian cyst that needed to come out. An overnight hospital stay. 2 weeks of careful recovery. I needed someone to have access to my accounts in case something went wrong. Someone who could pay my bills and manage things while I was under. My grandmother was 80. My closest friends were both out of the country that month for work. My brother offered. He was helpful about it, more helpful than he had been in years. And I was tired and a little frightened about the surgery, and I said yes. I gave him my online banking credentials, temporary access, I told him, just in case. He said, of course, don't worry about a thing. The surgery went smoothly. My recovery went smoothly. I changed my passwords 3 weeks later. Or I thought I did. What I did not know, what I only discovered much later when the fraud investigator walked me through it, was that my brother had set up a secondary access point before I changed the primary password. A linked device. A back door, essentially. My passwords changed. His access did not. 9 days. 3 transfers. $31,400 moved into a business account registered to his wife's boutique, a clothing store she had been trying to keep afloat for the past 2 years. I am not a person who cries easily. I inherited that from my grandmother. But I sat at that kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in March and I cried for about 4 minutes. Then I stopped. Then I called the bank. The fraud specialist I spoke to was calm and methodical, and exactly what I needed in that moment. She walked me through the process. I told her I believed the access had come through a secondary linked device. She told me they could trace the IP addresses, pull the device logs, verify everything. She froze all outgoing transactions immediately. She told me the investigation would take 7 to 10 business days, but that the funds would almost certainly be recoverable given the documentation trail. I asked her what I should do in the meantime. She said to file a police report and to contact an attorney. I filed the police report that afternoon. I called my attorney, a woman I had worked with when I helped my grandmother set up a revised power of attorney 2 years earlier. I called her the following morning. She pulled up my file, listened to everything I told her, and said, "I'll need to see the bank's IP logs when they're ready. In the meantime, don't contact your brother." I didn't. I want to explain something about those weeks, because I think people who have not been through something like this assume that silence means passivity. They assume that because you are not screaming, you are not acting. My brother called 3 times in those 2 weeks. I let every call go to voicemail. His wife texted twice to ask if I was coming to some family dinner she was organizing. I did not respond. My grandmother, when I visited on Saturdays, could tell something was wrong. She asked me once, gently, whether everything was all right. I told her I was handling something at work. She looked at me over her tea and she said, "You have always been the one who handles things." She said it like it was the highest compliment she knew how to give. I found out about my grandmother's arrangements on a Thursday evening, 6 weeks before her birthday party. She called me after dinner and asked me to come over. When I got there, she was sitting in her good chair, not the recliner she used for television, but the upright armchair by the window that she only used when something important was happening. She had a manila folder on the side table. She told me she had been making some changes. She told me she had started working on these changes 18 months ago, after a conversation she had with my brother and his wife that she had never told me about. She didn't describe that conversation in detail, but from the way her mouth pressed together when she mentioned it, I understood that it had told her something she needed to know. She opened the folder. The house had been transferred into my name 8 months ago. A clean deed transfer, recorded at the county clerk's office, fully legal and fully documented. Her investment portfolio, roughly $240,000 accumulated over 40 years of careful living, had been retitled into a trust with me as the sole beneficiary. Her attorney had handled everything. She had paid for it from a small account my brother didn't know existed. I looked at those documents for a long time. I looked at my grandmother. She said, "I've watched you show up for 30 years. I wanted to make sure that meant something." I told her she didn't have to do this. She said she knew she didn't have to. She said that was the point. I asked her if she knew what my brother was going to say. She said she had a pretty good idea. Then she asked if I would still throw her the birthday party we had been planning, the one at the Riverside Room downtown, the one with the good flowers, and the jazz quartet, and the chocolate cake from the bakery on 5th Street. I told her I wouldn't miss it for anything. Her party was on a Saturday in late April. 62 people. She had lived a long and well-connected life, and the room was full of her friends, her neighbors, people from her church, a few of her former colleagues from the insurance agency, where she had worked for 31 years. I had spent 3 months planning it. I had spent my own money on it, gladly. My brother arrived 45 minutes late with his wife. I had sent them both invitations and they had both confirmed they were coming. I watched them from across the room as they came through the door. His wife was wearing a dress I recognized. It was from her boutique, the one with the tags still in the window, that never seemed to sell anything. She was smiling the way she always smiled at family events, bright and directed outward, like a performance for people she wasn't sure were watching. My brother found me near the bar. He hugged me in that way he had, one arm, brief, the hug of someone completing a social obligation. He asked how things were going. I said fine. He asked if we could find some time to talk privately before the end of the night. I said sure. What I did not know until 20 minutes later was that he had already tried to have a different conversation. My grandmother's attorney was there. She had come as a guest, a family friend of 30 years. My brother found her near the dessert table. I learned later from the attorney herself what was said. My brother told her he had been thinking about Grandma's future care and that he and his wife were prepared to move in and help. He said he assumed, in that case, they would naturally be considered in any future estate planning. He said he hoped everything was still flexible. The attorney looked at him for a moment. Then she told him, very calmly, that the estate planning had been finalized 14 months ago and was not flexible. She told him the house and the investment accounts had already been legally transferred. She told him he could contact her office on Monday if he had specific questions, but that this was not the time or place for that conversation. I was talking to one of my grandmother's church friends when my brother crossed the room toward me. The expression on his face was one I recognized, though I had not seen it in years. It was the expression of a person who has just discovered that a door they assumed was open has been locked for a long time. He pulled me aside near the coat check. He said he needed to understand what was going on. He said the attorney had said some things he didn't fully follow. He said he hoped I hadn't been filling Grandma's head with ideas. I looked at him. I thought about the Tuesday morning in March. I thought about the fraud specialist's voice, calm and methodical. I thought about sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table every other Saturday for 2 years, going through insurance statements and investment reports while she drank her tea. I said, "The bank's investigation closed last Friday. I have the report if you need a copy." He went very still. I told him the police report had been filed 6 weeks ago. I told him my attorney had been in contact with the detective assigned to the case. I told him the IP logs had identified his home network as the source of all 3 transfers. I told him the funds had been frozen and would be returned to my account within the next 5 business days. His wife appeared beside him. She had the smile still arranged on her face, but her eyes were doing something different. He said I was overreacting. He said he had just been borrowing, that he had meant to tell me, that things had been hard with the boutique, and he had needed a temporary solution. He said I should have answered his calls. I said that I had been advised by my attorney not to contact him while the investigation was active. I said that advice still stood. His wife said this was a family matter, and that family handled things privately. I told her the bank disagreed. My grandmother appeared beside me then. I don't know how long she had been standing there. She was wearing the blue dress she had bought specifically for the party, and she had her good pearls on. And she looked, in that moment, like exactly who she was, a woman who had survived hard decades with her dignity completely intact. She looked at my brother. She looked at his wife. She said she wanted to enjoy her party. She said that she was 80 years old, and she had spent a great deal of her life being careful about who she trusted with, what she had built. She said she had not always gotten it right. She said she had done her best to correct that. She took my arm and she walked me back toward the dance floor, where the jazz quartet was playing something warm and unhurried, and 2 of her oldest friends were already swaying near the center of the room. My brother and his wife left 20 minutes later. I watched them go from across the room. His wife still had the smile, but it had changed shape. It looked like something that required effort now. The refund landed in my account 11 days later, $31,400, plus a small amount in interest that the bank added almost apologetically. My brother's attorney contacted my attorney 2 weeks after the party. He proposed a resolution. My attorney responded, "The process is ongoing, and I have been advised not to discuss the details, but I will say that the words full restitution appear in the most recent document I have signed. I still go to my grandmother's house on Saturdays. We still sit at the kitchen table. She still drinks her tea. Her hands are a little stiffer than they were 2 years ago, but she still asks sharp questions, and she still understands every answer. Last Saturday, she asked me if I was angry at my brother. I thought about it honestly, the way she has always taught me to think about difficult questions. I told her I was not angry in the way I expected to be. I told her what I mostly felt was tired of the version of myself that had assumed the people who should protect you would protect you, tired of relearning a lesson I should have understood earlier. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that being the one who shows up is not a weakness, even when someone tries to use it against you. She said it is only a weakness if you let it make you someone who stops showing up. I told her I wasn't planning to stop. She said she knew. There is a certain kind of person who mistakes your patience for ignorance. They look at your quiet and they see an opening. They assume that because you are not fighting loudly, you are not fighting at all. They move through your life making withdrawals they have never earned, certain that the account will never run dry, certain that you will absorb the cost, the way you have always absorbed the cost. What they miss, what my brother missed, what his wife missed, is that patience is not the same as passivity. Documentation is not the same as defeat. The person who is keeping careful records, building a quiet case, working methodically through every available option, that person is not losing. That person is simply operating on a timeline that the loudest voices in the room can't see. My grandmother understood that. She built her whole life on that principle. She transferred a house and a trust, and 40 years of careful saving into my name, and she never once announced it, never used it as leverage, never turned it into a performance. She just did it. And then she asked if the flowers for the party were still confirmed for Saturday. They were. White peonies, the way she wanted. If you have ever been the person in your family who shows up without being asked, who handles things without being thanked, who keeps the whole structure standing, while other people take credit for the view, I want you to hear this. The quiet work is not invisible. The right people see it. And sometimes, in ways you don't expect, it comes back to you. Change your passwords. Call your bank. Talk to an attorney. Document everything. And don't let anyone convince you that protecting yourself is a betrayal of the people who were never protecting you. The strongest move is usually the quietest one. And the quiet ones, we tend to hold all the cards.